Da 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 da. Mio on MMA time talking about UFC. Well, it'll be in the title, but it's UFC Vegas. Whatever. We're doing another Apex show, and also we got some PFL coming your way here. PFL number 9 playoff format here. Semifinals for the featherweights and for the welterweights. Let's get that out of the way first. Brendan Lougane versus Kai Kamaka the third. I really like Kai Kamaka the third. He's a pretty exciting fighter. He's pretty well rounded. He's had a really good PFL debut here, in this tournament. Honestly, better than I thought he would be, because he beat Bubba Jenkins. Now, I did think he would beat Pedro Carvalho. That was given. But, beating Bubba Jenkins, that's not nothing. I thought he would lose that fight. But he is up against Mr. PFL, Mr. Brendan Lougane, the man who has won, I want to say, 2 PFL titles already. I know he beat Bubba Jenkins for the title in 2022. And if I recall correctly, that was his second title. Because I think he won back in... No, he lost in 2021. Okay, maybe it's just the one time. All right, whatever. PFL is very confusing. It's hard to remember this stuff. It is kind of the problem. I would really like it at PFL, instead of doing 1 through X events each season, would have a different naming format so I could just look at Tapology and remember. But they don't do that. So, anyways, Lougane has beaten Pedro Carvalho and Justin Gonzalez, both by TKO, although Gonzalez was a cut. And he's looked very good in the tournament, obviously. We knew he was good to begin with. We knew he was an amazingly well-rounded fighter. A guy who absolutely should have been in the UFC, and famously on Dana White Contender Series, didn't get the contract for shooting for a late takedown. I get it, don't get me wrong. I hate the late, takedown to win the round idea, mostly because the scoring criteria is not supposed to award it. I would like to see that stop. But he should have been in the UFC. He's not. He's now Mr. PFL. I'm picking him to beat Kai Kamaka the third. I think these two are very similar in the sense that they're non-specialists. They're very much well-rounded kind of guys that can do a little bit of everything. They scramble well. They do their thing. I want to say Kamaka was a bantamweight. Am I misremembering that? Get back at his UFC record here. Oh, he was a featherweight. It's just that Jonathan Pierce fight, I think, that throws me off, because he looks tiny next to Jonathan Pierce. But that's also Jonathan Pierce. Jonathan Pierce is a huge featherweight. So there you go. Anyways, Lougane decision. I generally think he'll just be slightly ahead in the scrambles, slightly ahead in everything else. He is a prohibitive favorite at minus 300 to minus 400. Kamaka plus 290 at the high side, down to about plus 240 by the looks of it. So anyways, there you go. By the way, the usual anti-betting stance here. Bet what you can lose. MMA is an inherently chaotic, destructive force. And if you're out there betting your next car payment on the fights and you lose it, there is zero sympathy. I do bet. I do break down the odds. But it is not a path to financial freedom that some people tend to treat it as. So let's move on down to the welterweight division. Magomed Umalatov versus Neiman Gracie. I am going to go with Umalatov. He's been very good in this tournament. He beat Andrei Koreshkov, who was my pick to win, and then Brennan Ward. And I know those are not amazing wins necessarily. Was supposed to fight Don Madge here. Madge pulled out. Now he gets Neiman Gracie. The name is fantastic. It's destructive and so on, but I don't know. Neiman Gracie hasn't looked all that good for a while. The 2 losses to Goto Yamamuchi, the close fight with Don Madge, the loss to Logan Storley. I don't know. I'm just not feeling it right now. And Umalatov has a very high pedigree, takedown, top grappling game that probably just won't be all that worried about Gracie. And I don't think Gracie can out wrestle him. And Umalatov's not a bad striker either. So he should be able to more or less have his way on the feet. So he has 2 ways of winning this fight. The old classic sprawl and brawl way to avoid losing to a jiu-jitsu guy. And that I honestly think that his top game is good enough to just more or less ignore what Gracie's going to be good at. He's not necessarily a guy who should be afraid of Going into the guard, what are the odds here? Is the Gracie name doing anything? Oh no, oh god, no. Holy crap. Okay. Magomed Ubalatov is an insane favorite here. Minus 1587 at the low end. Up to minus 3,200? That's insane. That's stupid. Neiman Gracie is a plus 800 at the low end to plus 1,400 underdog. I don't know. I might bet on Gracie at those odds because that's insane. Nothing Umalatov has done is like worth that. I mean, the dude is undefeated. He's very, very good. He's a massive prospect. 16-0. Well, I guess he's 32, so he's not really a prospect, but 16-0, up and comer in the world, undefeated in the PFL at like something like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-0. Been with the PFL, doing good things since like 2019. Yeah, I definitely got to pick him, but like minus 3,000. What are we? What are we doing here, people? This shouldn't be minus 4 figures. Okay, there you go. Sliding on down, I have the other featherweight semifinal here. Timur Khizriev versus Gabriel Braga. Braga has had a weird run here because, of course, he missed weight against Bubba Jenkins, but ended up beating him, and he also beat Justin Gonzalez. Prior to that, of course, losing to Jesus Pinedo in the finals of last season. And then for Khizriev, he has gone through a pretty hard like ex-UFC run here. Brett Johns and Enrique Barzola. He's undefeated. He is your typical Dagestani fighter. He can box a little bit, obviously, but it is the takedowns, the grinding, the grappling that is the key to his victory. Braga is a knockout artist, creative, dynamic, powerful striker, good on the counter, and not necessarily all that easy to take down. I mean, beating Bubba Jenkins is beating a very credentialed wrestler. That being said, I never feel great about Braga. I just don't. There's too much of a reliance on big moments for him. And Khizriev feels like the type of guy who's just going to take those away from him and just grind him out. So I'm going to go with Khizriev. Decision. What are the betting odds? Khizriev is a somewhat prohibitive favorite. Minus 425 to minus 550. That's a little steep. Braga coming in at plus, what's the bottom number here? Plus 330 to plus 370. So I don't know. I kind of do like I kind of like those odds for Braga. Like that's a possible bet. And then the final semifinal, Shamul Musafayev versus Merab Ramazanov. These two guys fought each other literally like 2 months ago. I pretty much have to still take Shamil Musayev. I mean, I picked Ramazanov coming into that fight. I thought Musayev was a little too Alexander Shlemenko, to use an old school Russian MMA reference. A little too random, a little too funky, a little bit too out there, but he knocked him out without much of a problem, and he's obviously very good at resisting wrestling. So yeah, I got to go with Musayev. He's probably my pick to win. I don't know. I probably would. He wasn't on my radar, honestly, coming in because I thought he was just a little bit too silly. But he might actually be able to win this whole thing because, like, if we get Umalatov versus Musayev in the final, that's a big deal. Umalatov is a better version and a more dynamic version of Ramazanov. So I don't know. That could be interesting. I guess it depends on how this fight goes. Ray Cooper III versus Muhammad Burkahimov. Don't really care. Picking Ray Cooper. Burkahimov did not impress me at all in like the Lorenz Larkin fights. And I Lorenz Larkin is awesome, obviously, but still. Luka Paklet by submission is my pick as well. I'm just going to go through these like undercard bouts really, really quickly because they tend to not to be tremendously well matched. Tyler Diamond versus Enrique Barzola. That one's interesting. It's two guys who are going to want to take top position and really kind of need it to make their games work, and are also both guys who have kind of failed out of the UFC. Of course, Tyler Diamond fought Bryce Mitchell on the Ultimate Fighter finale, Ultimate Fighter 27. Don't know why he didn't get signed because he went to a majority decision, like a very competitive fight with Bryce Mitchell. Don't know why he didn't stick around. Other than that, he's lost to Habibulayev and Logain, who are both Very, very good. And otherwise, beat Brett Johns impressively. I don't know. I guess I got to go with him to win by decision here. He is, I think, a better wrestler than Barzola, but Barzola is really, really hard to deal with, especially if you can't light him up at range. So we'll go with Diamond. I don't have odds for that fight. Jesse Stern, Jose Perez. Don't know them really all that well. Don't know. Actually, I really don't know the rest of these fighters at all well. So I'm not going to break them down. So my finals picks are Logain versus Kizriev and Umalatov versus Musafayev. 3 Russians in the finals for PFL is my pick. And then we go over to the UFC Vegas card. Again, it's Vegas 90 something. It'll be in the title if you really need that number, but whatever. It's the August 24th Apex show. And it's not a bad card, actually, by Apex standards. We got Jared Cannonier versus Caio Borralho. That is a relevant and interesting main event. We've got Angela Hill, Tabitha Ricci in the co-main event. That is an interesting and relevant co-main event. We have the tough finals, which I'm not especially looking forward to either of them. It's not that they're bad fighters. It's just I think there's a very, very boring of both Ryan Loder and Robert Valentine and Khan Offley, and I think it's Offley anyways, Myron Santos. I had to crash watch all of the Ultimate Fighter to, catch up on them. And then we got Michael Morales, Neil Magny. That's a good fight. That's an interesting fight. It's a big moment for Magny, or not for Magny, for Morales, pardon me. Shabazian versus GM3 is a similar type of fight. The undercard, though, I will say, is a bit of slop. I'm not really hyped for Dennis Buzukja versus Francis Marshall. They're both guys who I don't really think are UFC caliber, and both their biggest wins are like Connor Matthews. Jose Medina versus Zach Reese is 2 guys who, again, shouldn't really be here. Josiane Nunez versus Jacqueline Cavalcanti. That one's fine, but it's women's bantamweight, which is a division that's not really going anywhere right now. And then we have a pair of fights that might actually be pretty good. Vyacheslav Borshow, versus James Lawntrop. I think that's going to be a really good fight. And Kong Wang versus Victoria Leonardo I'm reasonably excited to see Kong Wang here. I mean, she does have a kickboxing win over Valentina Shevchenko. That's pretty cool. Anyways, but like Victoria Leonardo, I forgot she was still around before they booked this fight, and I'm kind of wondering why, because she's a fighter who takes like severe damage in like every fight. And then there's a random tough fight between Zigomantis Ramaska versus Nathan Fletcher. Don't really know why that's happening. They both had one fight on the show. Fletcher lost. Ramaska won. Not against each other, so like it's not a rematch from Tough. I didn't watch the drama parts of the show, so maybe there's something to explain that, and we'll get that in the highlight package, but I don't know. It's just kind of a weird fight to put on here in this era where like guys who lose on Tough don't really get much of a shine. So I don't know why Nathan Fletcher's here. I guess because he's related. He's from Paddy Pimblett's Next Generation Liverpool camp. It's not Pimblett's gym, but it's the one that he trains out of. So maybe that's really maybe it's not more complicated than that. All right, let's talk about the fights. Jared Cannonier versus Caio Borralho, and this fight unfortunately relies entirely on Jared Cannonier. Although, interesting note, MMA Lab for Cannonier, Fighting Nerds for Caio Borralho. It's got to be the nerdiest showdown of fight camps of all time. A prime Cannonier, aka the guy who beat Marvin Vettori and played with some range, showed his power, showed his strength, showed his good evasive footwork, and was able to really take apart Marvin Vettori in a way that we had not seen before, probably wins this fight. The problem is that the Jared Cannonier who fought Nasruddin Imavov could not maintain any kind of range, wasn't comfortable striking in long combination sequences, and was taken down by Imavov, keep that in mind, and was willing to engage in the clinch wrestling with Imavov, loses this fight to Caio Borralho. So that's the problem, is it just Jared Cannonier has hit the end of the rope here because he's 40 years old, which is obviously an advanced age for MMA, even at middleweight. And 2 fights ago, I'd be really confident. 1 fight ago, no. And that's a problem. So we'll go through Borralho real quick because like I've talked about Cannonier. Let's give Borralho his props. He has been on a run in the UFC. He is aggressive. He fights at a decent pace when it's required. That's the thing, actually, I think I like about him is that he is adaptive to the situation. He can be just a grinding force against, say, Armin Petrosian. But he can also be a guy who's like, no, we know what we can do against Abus Magomedov. Let's show off a little bit and let's do that. And then obviously the Paul Craig fight where he just crushes him. Like he's clearly a very good athlete, fairly well-rounded, has a better striking game than I probably ever have really given him credit for, and obviously can fight all things. Like he can game plan, he can do some things, which is nice because middleweight is the world of toys that really only can do one thing. So in that regard, he is a breath of fresh air. So I'm taking him here just because we saw Cannonier lose a fight similar to this against Nassoudimov. It looks like his durability is fading. It looks like his speed is fading. It looks like his ability to not just kind of be a clinch fighter is on the downslope, but that could also just be a bad thing. Like maybe he was hurt, maybe he was a problem, but like I haven't seen the Jared Cannonier of old for 14 months. He's 40. That's a hard one to pick. So Borralho by decision, he's minus 235 to minus 250. Cannonier plus 180 to plus 205. That could go a very different way though. Angela Hill versus Tabitha Ricci. I will give my standard disclaimer that I have been wrong on Tabitha Ricci fights a lot. When I pick against Tabitha Ricci, you should probably pick for her because I picked her to lose to Tisha Pennington. Although to be clear, I do think she did lose to Tisha Pennington. That is something I'm gonna stand on that hill. But continuing on, I also thought she would lose to Jillian Robinson, and she did not. I thought she would lose to Jessica Penne, and she did not. I thought she would lose to Polyana Viana, and she did not. I thought she would lose to Maria Oliveira, and she did not. So I have yet to pick her successfully to win a fight because the other two fights that I didn't mention there are fights against Lupi Godinez and Manon Fiorot, which I picked her to lose, and she did. But Baby Shark and I are not having a great time with the picks. Anyways, I'm still going to go with Angela Hill. It's a dangerous fight for her because Ricci is going to get the clinch. Hill doesn't deny the clinch. Hill doesn't fight in a way that minimizes a chance to put grappling situations on her. It's why Mackenzie Dern had one of her best fights of all time against her. It's why Verna Jandiroba was able to pull her into basically at will grappling exchanges. It's why even going back like Amanda Lemos was able to have a lot of success against her. But it's not a death sentence. She did beat, Luana Pinheiro, who is not a bad clinch fighter. She did beat Lupi Godinez, who beat Tabitha Ricci, which MMA math is not a great thing. It obviously fails a lot. But if we look at that, Godinez, who is a somewhat better version of what Ricci's going to try to do, was unable to do that to Hill. That does speak of like some good things that like Ricci, who is really an atomweight, is kind of limited by her size. And that's the thing I can never get past. I can never get past the idea that this is a girl who is a grinder, is a takedown artist, is a top control person when they win, can strike, obviously, is fairly well-rounded. But a lot of what Ricci does to get victories is, I don't want to say size reliant, but it is something that is greatly helped by having size. And she is an atomweight. So I may regret it, but I'm just going to go with Angela Hill to be the better striker, to put on more pace, to have a close fight because Angela Hill does not blow people out of the water either, but to be able to utilize the clinch to do damage to Ricci in a way that offsets any takedowns that Ricci gets or any moments of control or any control in the clinch. So Angela Hill by decision. This is very much a pick'em fight. Ricci is minus 110 to minus 118. Hill is minus 108 to minus 112. So they are both favorites depending on which book you are looking at. But it's very much a pick 'em fight. There's not much to choose between them here. Also, I spelled Ricci wrong somehow in my notes, so I'm gonna fix that real quick. Ryan Loder versus Robert Valentine, the middleweight final of the Ultimate Fighter. I don't have a lot to say about this. Ryan Loder is a all-American wrestler, very good pedigree, associated with the Uriah Hall's Team Alpha Male camp, but way too big for that camp. He is athletic. He has a wrestling game that at 185 should do actually pretty well, but that is the game. There's not a lot beyond that. He's got some submission ability. He's not completely lost on the feet, but outside of the wrestling, I don't think that there's anything about him that is functional. There is nothing there that is. He is going to have to out wrestle Robert Valentine to get the win. We know what a Ryan Loder win looks like, and it's kind of dull. Robert Valentine is a more typical MMA guy. Lots of submissions on his record. I am stunned that he doesn't have TKO victories more frequently, because both on the Ultimate Fighter and also just like in general in a lot of his fights, dude looks like he hits really, really hard. And it's kind of weird that 13 fight pro career, 10-3 record, he has like, I don't think he even has this. Okay, he does have one TKO victory and one stoppage due to tap out, due to strikes, and one referee stoppage, which I have not watched, at Levels Fight League against Remco van der Brink, that I do not know what happened in. But there's a remarkable lack of it. It's more submission oriented. It's rear naked chokes, it's guillotines, it's a decision. He does have a notable loss to Ibo Aslan, and could be the problem is that he's honestly fought a lot at light heavyweight, maybe. I don't know. No, most of this is middleweight. His early fights are at 205, but like he's been a middleweight for some time. Anyways, I am going to pick Robert Valentine. I think this is mostly that I want him to win. Loder comes off as a bit of a dingus, honestly, in the little bits of like his personality I saw speed watching the show. And he's also just kind of dull. But there is a world, and even like a likely world, where Loder gives Valentine the standard welcome to America moment, wherein a person from a non-wrestling heavy part of the world, which Central Europe, Switzerland is, comes to face with like top end American or Russian or even Middle Eastern to a certain degree wrestling, and they just get that rude awakening. And Loder could definitely be that, but I'll go with Valentine by TKO just because I find Loder's like reactions on the feet to just be very, very troubling. And there's just, he doesn't offer much. It's like, it's very much, you're just waiting for him to try to walk you to the cage or walk you to the fence and put you down. So hopefully Valentine can deal with that. He is a minus 163 to minus 185 favorite. Loder coming at plus 130 to plus 150. I will say this, if you're betting on this fight, it's probably on Loder. Con Offley versus Myron Santos is the other final for the Ultimate Fighter at the 145-pound weight division. I will say this, Con really probably is going to end up as a bantamweight at some point, because he is 5'6" with a 64-inch reach. That is very limiting to him at 145. He got to the finals in a bit of a weird way. He was fighting the South African guy whose name I'm blanking on right now. But anyways, the South African guy shot in for a takedown, and Khan got away with like 2 different cage grabs while kind of shifting himself into a position to hit a guillotine choke to get here. So I don't know. It feels a little bit ick when that happens. He's a competent grappler, particularly when it comes to attacking necks from the front headlock and also from the back. He has a good back take game. His striking is okay, but I wouldn't get excited about it. His level of pre-tough competition is pretty poor. And again, being the 5'6", 64-inch guy at 145, I don't think that striking is ever going to really be a means to victory. Unless he turns into Alexander Volkanovski, I guess. Santos is a dynamic, good striker. He is powerful. He hits on the counter well. He can fight pretty well off the back foot as well. He is creative. He'll fight at a good pace. He had issues during the Tough Run with wrestling, but he also faced two of the better wrestlers in the Tough House, so I don't know. But he also does have a loss to Dan Argueta pre-UFC LFA when he just got kind of crushed by pressure and wrestling. And it was not a good look. It was not a good look. But I do like the fact that I was watching him on Tough after having seen the Argueta fight while I was studying for his debut against Sean Woodson, which ended up not happening because of visa issues. It was good to see him getting taken down, but still being really hard to control and repositioning, fighting for position and so on, making it so that I don't think Argueta could do the same thing to him again. And I'm going to hope that he's just getting better and better and better, that he's realized this weakness to his game and that he's going to do some good things here. Although I do think he is also probably long-term a bantamweight. So I'm taking Santos by decision. Khan is tough, hard to finish. Santos is a finisher generally, but he also can go the distance. So Santos by decision, but I will say there is a world where Khan just comes out and looks like Dan Argueta against Myron Santos again and just kind of crushes him. Honestly, kind of like a can. Santos is the minus 175 to minus 200 favorite. Khan is plus 140 to plus 164. Michael Morales, Neil Magny. This fight is insane odds because Morales is minus 800 to minus 950 and Magny is plus 500 to plus 600. And the reason I say that is ridiculous because Neil Magny has been the death of many, many, many prospects. They have come in against Magny with all the hype and it just gets crushed because Magny is he's a mind F. He's a guy who is 6'3", massive 80-inch reach for the weight class, very uncomfortable to strike with. Well, even though he's not, I've never even described his striking as good, but it's just uncomfortable. And that leads to people fighting him in the clinch repetitively, where he sucks the life out of them. And even if you're Mike Malott and you're kind of prepared for that and you're ready to go and you can make it work, you get tired clinching with him so much and he finishes you in the third round. I am going to pick Morales to win. He's a phenomenal athlete with a wrestling background. His striking is coming along, but it is still pretty janky. He should even be able to clinch with Magny and actually do his thing. In theory. But I'm just not comfortable with those betting odds because I'm not comfortable with Neil Magny ever being plus 500 to plus 600. So Morales by decision is the pick. I wouldn't bet on it at those odds. If you are betting, Magny at the underdog odds is the answer. Edmund Shabazian versus GM3 Gerald Meerschaert. This is kind of a similar deal. Shabazian's 26 years old. He's still a guy that there is hope for. Fantastic physicality, very imposing, very dominant early in fights, but tends to fall apart. And the problem here is, from a picking standpoint, is this is kind of in this gray area because Shabazian went on a bad streak where he lost to Anthony Hernandez, Nasruddin Imavov, Jack Hermanson, etc. Went on I think a 4-fight losing skid, and then also had the Perez loss later, or the Hernandez loss later on. So it's we know he can break. We know that constant pressure does break him. It was a 3-fight losing streak. It was Brunson, Hermanson, Imavov. And in the meantime, he's kind of gotten back into it by beating Dolce Lungiambul and AJ Dobson. But it's those are way more flawed, way less technical, way less, also very physically reliant fighters that GM3 is not. So does GM3, who is a very veteran-savvy fighter, find a way to break Shabazian? I'm going to go with no, because GM3 has not looked amazing lately. Still picking up wins. Coming off a win against Brian Barberena, but that's about all two old guys. Lost to Andre Petrosky. Really got nuked by Joe Pyfer. No shame there, but still. Had the good run against Bruno Silva, but then the loss to Yatko. It's been a while since he beat somebody that I have real hopes for, I guess. You could maybe go back to Murdoch, but I never had much of the way of hopes for Mahmoud Murdoch. So it's probably more like, I guess, maybe Trevin Giles. So I'm going to go with Shabazian by TKO, but like there is a world where Shabazian does very, very well early on, and then like a couple setups happen, and he just kind of falls apart, and Meerschaert takes over. Like that can happen, but I'm not going to pick it. Shabazian is the minus 290 to minus 310 favorite. Meerschaert coming back at plus 225 to plus 240. Denis Buzukja versus Francis Marshall. This is a hard fight for me to get a feel of because like they're both very flawed, but in different ways. Buzukja is just kind of undercooked, it seems. He's not fully cooked in anything. He can strike, he can wrestle, he could scramble. He's an okay athlete, but there's no skill set that seems to be like reliable in a path to victory. It shows, when he faces someone like Connor Matthews, who is a profoundly flawed fighter. Both of these guys, by the way, have wins over Connor Matthews. Marshall beat him on the Contender Series and Buzukja in the UFC. But a profoundly flawed fighter. He can break him down. He can take him apart. But he also can get nuked by Jamal Emmers and pose no real solutions to a guy like Sean Woodson or Melsik Baghdasaryan, despite their own very, very limited games, their own obvious flaws and ways to victory. And in Marshall's case, there's just a very, very narrow game. He wants to wrestle and grapple, and that is it. He does not really want to strike. So if you could take that away from him like Isaac Dolgarian did, you could stop him. If you could take that away from him and make things just kind of like a really sloppy kickboxing match like Willie Gomez did, you can beat him. You can even have success if you're Marcelo Rojo by just like not letting him impose his will on you, but then get knocked out. And the KO of Marcelo Rojo, I think, is not predictive of what can happen in the future. So there is a world where Marshall comes out and pretty much just instantly starts putting Buzukja on his back and like does his thing. And it looks like every other Francis Marshall win. There's nothing about Buzukja that guarantees that he can stop that. But I do like the process that he's come together with. And like, despite the most recent example of their coaching, Charles Ampus Gregorio, I do have faith in the Weidman, Longo, Serra coaching tree. I want to think that they'll have solutions, and Buzukja is a good enough athlete. He's certainly better than athlete than anyone that Francis Marshall has actually beaten. And he can just kind of stop a one-dimensional attack and be kind of a brick wall for Marshall to smash into repetitively and slowly take apart and win a decision. So, Buzukja by decision. I may regret that. Marshall is the favorite at minus 146 to minus 162. I get that. He has multiple wins in the UFC. Buzukja plus 114 to plus 136. Jose Medina versus Zach Reese is a bag of dog poo on fire on a porch. Why is Medina here? He lost to Magomed Yashalov, who is not very good. See his fight with Brenson Hibero in the UFC. He's not particularly big, not particularly athletic. He is violent, but he's beaten a grand total of 3 fighters with a winning record, and the best of them is 4-2. It's not good. Reese is also not particularly good, but he is big and relatively physically imposing and like knocked out Julian Marquez. So Reese by TKO. It's going to be a flaming trash bag, but it might be fun. It might be a fun flaming trash bag. Reese is a minus 546 to minus 600 favorite. Medina coming in at plus 370 to plus 430. I don't understand how people can win on the Contender Series, not get a contract, and this guy, Jose Medina, gets a contract. Don't get it. I mean, I kind of do, maybe. I don't know. An attempt to make the Bolivian scene come to life? I don't know. Vyacheslav Borshow versus James Lontrop. Lontrop had a lot of hype coming into his debut, but then he ended up losing to a pretty journeyman fighter. This should be really fun. This is a potential fight of the night. These are two guys who like to strike and have an inability to really grapple, but they will probably just bang with each other. On paper, Borralho is the better striker. He has UFC caliber wins over Mahashate and Chris Duncan. He has a draw with Nazim Sadikov, which highlighted some problems, but like also highlighted some strengths that like it is kind of scary to strike with him. Lon Top is a lot of fun. He is very violent, very aggressive. Let the sparks fly. I got Borralho by TKO. He's a minus 210 to minus 230 favorite. Lon Top plus 175 to plus 195. I'm just looking forward to violence there. Josiane Nunez versus Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Cavalcanti has to be my pick here. Nunez is 5'2". This is bantamweight. Cavalcante is pretty unproven. I mean, she did fight at a very high pace and like utilize some good outside striking to beat Farziam in her not Farziam. Oh, what is her name? What is her name? I'm slightly embarrassed now. Zara Fairn. Boom. There you go. I think she actually trains with Farziam. And of course has a win on the regional scene over Melissa Croden, who is not very good, but like is big and like decently achieved, and also beat Nora Cornole back in 2021 on FFA Challenge. I don't think I've ever seen that fight. I can't comment, but her alone losses to Martina Jindarova, who is pretty good and doing good things in PFL. Don't let the 6-5 record fool you about Jindarova. Her problem is that she has faced really good competition. It's an on-paper better record or an on-paper record that seems worse than it is. Anyways, Cavalcanti is taller, longer, fights at a good pace. Nunez is powerful, dynamic, and can definitely knock her out, can definitely catch her with some stuff, but I'm going to go with Cavalcanti by decision. She is minus 200 to minus 225. Nunez is plus 163 to plus 180. Then we have the weird, tough fight, Zygmantas Ramaska versus Nathan Fletcher. Ramaska is the guy who got pulled out of the tough tournament because he broke his face. Ouch. He looks good. Like, he is very, very violent, very defensively open on the feet. Like, he is a guy who gets hurt like basically every fight, but he is clearly very strong, very powerful, 5'11" at featherweight. I don't have a reach reading for him, but is undoubtedly probably quite large. Anyways, he's got all the physical tools in the world and obviously the toughness and the durability. His grappling seems basic, but like it is there. There are ideas of how to fight off takedowns. There are wins by submission on his record. There's a lack of actual testing of that, but still. Nathan Fletcher is one of Paddy Pimblett's teammates over at Next Gen Liverpool. He is not good. And what I mean by that is that there's reasonable technical soundness to him. He's not comically bad on the feet. He's a good grappler. He's got some good submission wins. He's dangerous from guard position and stuff. But the thing with him is that I just don't think he's that good of an athlete. Like, I watched his tough fight. I watched a couple of other fights from the regional scene. I don't think that there's like the strength, the explosiveness, the power to actually make it work. The speed to make it work. So I could be totally wrong. He could go out there and take down Ramaska like right away and like the fight's over. Because like, you know, he is a very good technical grappler. It's just it's not really how it leads. And also he's a bantamweight by trade, not the featherweight. So he's smaller than Ramaska, probably will be surprised, shocked, somewhat put on the back foot by Ramaska's aggression and power. So Ramaska by TKO is my pick. Fletcher is a minus 175 to minus 185 favorite. Ramaska plus 140 to plus 145. Kong Wang versus Victoria Leonardo. I think I basically went over this in the intro. Wang brings a very solid kickboxing pedigree to the UFC, including the win over Valentina Shevchenko, also some notable ones over Neely Block and Cyril de Jong, and a draw with Tiffany Van Zoost. That's not nothing. That's a pretty solid resume for someone transitioning to MMA. She is undefeated in MMA with a win over UFC vet Yanan Wu. Admittedly, not a very good UFC vet. Yanan Wu was a very, very flawed fighter, lacking fighter. So I'm not sure that that means much, but it leaves her a little bit undertested with some questions, but like she does seem to have like sound striking along with being pretty strong and hard to just kind of bowl over and take down. So there you go. Leonardo is strong, but otherwise not very aggressive. She's had her arm broken like 2 or 3 times. She gets hit really, really hard. And that's about it, really. She's not particularly technical in anything. She'll bring a fight to Kong Wang, but Kong Wang should be able to knock her out. Or go to decision with her, I guess, after outstriking her. So, anyways, Wong by TKO. She's a minus 1,000 to minus 1,200 favorite. Leonardo plus 625 to plus 750. I can't really argue with that. Leonardo, honestly, being under contract is surprising. Anyways, I'll be back after the fights on Sunday with a recap of both cards. Hopefully, some good action. My expectations aren't super high, but they're not super low either. So there you go. Check out my social medias down below. There are links to them, as well as the Discord simulator with the MMA fight simulator and my video gaming stuff. If you enjoy the sound of my voice and would like to see me get even nerdier than this is the low nerd setting.